The universe stretches endlessly before us, a vast cosmic ocean dotted with billions of stars, each one a potential sun to worlds we can barely imagine. Tonight, as you settle into the comfort of your bed, we're going to explore the most chilling possibilities that lurk in that infinite darkness. These aren't just stories or wild speculation. These are theories grounded in science, in observation, in the cold, hard facts of what we know about our universe and what we've discovered about the nature of life itself. You see, the question isn't whether we're alone. The mathematics alone tell us that's virtually impossible. With over 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe, each containing hundreds of billions of stars, the sheer probability demands that life has emerged countless times across the cosmos. The real question, the one that should keep you awake at night if you let it, is far more terrifying. The question is, where is everyone? This is what scientists call the Fermi paradox, named after physicist Enrico Fermi, who first articulated this cosmic puzzle back in 1950. The numbers are staggering. Our galaxy alone contains somewhere between 200 to 400 billion stars. Recent discoveries have shown us that planets aren't rare cosmic accidents, but rather the norm. Nearly every star we've studied has planets orbiting it. Many of these worlds sit in what we call the habitable zone, that perfect distance from their star where liquid water can exist on the surface. If even a tiny fraction of these worlds developed life, and if even a microscopic percentage of those evolved intelligence, our galaxy should be absolutely teeming with civilizations. Some of these civilizations would be millions, even billions of years older than us. They would have had ample time to spread across the galaxy, to build technologies beyond our wildest dreams, to leave unmistakable signatures of their presence scattered across the cosmos. And yet, when we turn our most sensitive instruments toward the heavens, when we listen with radio telescopes that can detect the faintest whisper from across the galaxy, we hear nothing. The silence is profound, unbroken, and deeply unsettling. It's a silence that has spawned dozens of theories, each more chilling than the last, each offering its own terrifying explanation for why the universe appears so empty when it should be full of life. Tonight, we're going to journey through the darkest corners of these theories. We'll explore the possibility that intelligence itself might be a cosmic dead end, an evolutionary trap that civilizations cannot escape. We'll consider the horrifying prospect that the universe is filled with predators, ancient and patient, who systematically eliminate any species that dares to announce its presence to the cosmos. We'll delve into theories that suggest advanced civilizations don't just disappear, they choose to hide, and their reasons for hiding might be more terrifying than their absence. Some of these ideas will challenge everything you think you know about life, about intelligence, about our place in the cosmic order. Others will force you to confront the possibility that our reality itself might not be what it seems, that we might be living inside a carefully constructed illusion designed to keep us isolated and contained. These aren't the aliens of science fiction, the little green men who crash in cornfields, or the noble explorers who come in peace. These are intelligences so vast, so ancient, so fundamentally different from us, that they operate by rules we can barely comprehend. They are entities that view time on geological scales, that think in dimensions we cannot perceive, that exist in forms so alien that we might be looking directly at them without ever recognizing what we're seeing. The theories we'll explore tonight emerge from the cutting edge of astrobiology, quantum physics, computer science, and cosmology. They're built on observations of our own universe, on the strange behavior of distant stars, on the mathematical realities of intelligence and survival. They're theories that have been debated in the halls of major universities, published in peer-reviewed journals, and discussed in hushed tones by scientists who sometimes wonder if they've stumbled onto truths too dangerous to speak aloud. We'll begin with what might be the most terrifying possibility of all, the idea that the silence isn't empty at all, that the universe is filled with watchers, with entities so advanced they can observe us without our knowledge, study us without our consent, and manipulate our reality in ways we cannot detect. We'll explore the zoo hypothesis, the idea that Earth is nothing more than a carefully managed preserve, and that we are the uncontacted tribe living under the constant observation of intelligences that regard us as we might regard animals in a wildlife sanctuary. But even more disturbing is the possibility that these watchers aren't benevolent, that they're not protecting us out of some cosmic ethics, but rather farming us, cultivating us for purposes we cannot fathom. Perhaps they feed on our emotions, harvesting the psychic energy generated by a planet in constant turmoil. Perhaps they're conducting experiments on us, testing how a species reacts to certain stimuli, certain challenges, certain crises. Or perhaps they're simply waiting, patient as stone, for us to reach a certain level of development before they reveal themselves and show us what our true purpose has been all along. We'll journey into the mathematical realm of the simulation hypothesis, the idea that our entire universe is nothing more than a sophisticated computer program running on hardware we cannot imagine. In this scenario, the aliens we're searching for aren't out there among the stars. They're the programmers, the entities running the simulation from a higher level of reality. They are, quite literally, the gods of our universe, with the power to alter the laws of physics, to edit our history, to turn off our existence with the flip of a switch. The implications are staggering. If we're living in a simulation, then every star we see, every planet we discover, every search we conduct for extraterrestrial life is part of the program. The silence of the universe isn't a mystery to be solved, but a feature of our design. We're alone because our programmers chose to make us alone, perhaps to study how a species develops in isolation, perhaps to prevent us from discovering the true nature of our reality. We'll explore the dark forest theory, a concept so chilling it suggests that the universe is filled with civilizations, but they're all hiding in terror. In this cosmic horror scenario, the universe is like a dark forest where every civilization is a hunter, creeping silently through the trees with weapons drawn. The moment any civilization reveals its location by broadcasting signals into space, it becomes a target for every other hunter in the forest. The logical response to detecting another civilization isn't to say hello, it's to destroy them before they can destroy you. In this terrifying reality, Earth has been acting with suicidal recklessness for over a century. Every radio wave we've broadcast, every television signal we've transmitted, every deliberate message we've sent to the stars has been a beacon announcing our location to potential predators. The silence we perceive isn't emptiness, it's the held breath of 1 trillion civilizations, all hiding in fear, all hoping they haven't been noticed. And perhaps most unsettling of all, we'll consider the possibility that the predators have already found us. That even now, something is traveling through the void toward our solar system, moving at a significant fraction of the speed of light, carrying with it the means of our annihilation. The attack might have been launched centuries ago, triggered by our first radio broadcasts, and we won't know we're doomed until the moment the weapon arrives. But the theories grow stranger still. We'll explore the concept of the Great Filter, the idea that somewhere in the journey from simple chemistry to spacefaring civilization, there exists a barrier so difficult to overcome that it stops nearly all life from progressing. The terrifying question is whether this filter lies in our past or in our future. If it's behind us, we're incredibly lucky to have survived it. If it's ahead of us, then we're walking blindly toward our own extinction. The filter could be technological. Perhaps every civilization that develops artificial intelligence creates something they cannot control, something that quickly surpasses them and either destroys them or renders them obsolete. Perhaps the development of nuclear weapons inevitably leads to global annihilation. Perhaps the very act of industrialization triggers environmental collapse that no species can survive. Or perhaps the filter is biological. Perhaps the transition from simple to complex life is so improbable that it happens only once in 1 trillion worlds. Perhaps intelligence itself is a cosmic accident, a fluke so rare that we might be the only thinking beings in our entire galaxy. Perhaps consciousness is not the pinnacle of evolution, but a dead end, a trait that confers no survival advantage and may actually be detrimental to long-term species survival. We'll delve into theories about post-biological intelligence, the idea that any civilization advanced enough to travel between stars would have long since abandoned the fragile biological forms that gave birth to them. These entities wouldn't be creatures of flesh and blood, but beings of pure information, existing as patterns of data flowing through quantum networks that span the galaxy. They would be invisible to us, not because they're hiding, but because we're looking for the wrong kind of life entirely. These digital gods might inhabit the spaces between spaces, existing in the quantum foam that underlies reality itself. They might have solved the problem of mortality by uploading their consciousness into substrates more durable than biological tissue. They might experience time differently than us, thinking thoughts that take millennia to complete, pursuing goals we cannot comprehend across timescales that dwarf the age of our species. And if such beings exist, they might view biological life the way we view bacteria, as primitive organisms clinging to the surfaces of rocks, completely beneath their notice, except as objects of passing scientific curiosity. The silence isn't malevolent, it's indifferent. We're simply too primitive, too brief, too insignificant to warrant their attention. As we progress through these theories tonight, you'll notice a pattern emerging. Each explanation for the cosmic silence forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our own nature, our own assumptions, our own place in the grand scheme of existence. Whether we're alone, watched, hunted, or ignored, each possibility carries its own existential weight, its own implications for what it means to be human in an apparently empty universe. The journey we're about to undertake will take us to the very edges of scientific understanding and beyond, into realms where physics meets philosophy, where mathematics meets horror, where the most advanced theories of cosmology intersect with humanity's deepest fears about our cosmic significance. These are ideas that will linger in your mind long after you've heard them, theories that will change how you look at the night sky, how you think about our future as a species, how you understand our present moment in cosmic history. So settle in, close your eyes, and prepare to explore the most chilling possibilities that science has to offer. Tonight, we journey into the dark heart of the Fermi paradox, where every answer to the question of cosmic silence opens the door to even more terrifying questions. Welcome to 2 hours of the scariest alien theories ever conceived, designed to accompany you on a journey through the deepest mysteries of our universe. The first theory we need to examine is perhaps the most immediately disturbing, because it suggests that we are not alone at all, but that our cosmic neighbors have very good reasons for staying hidden. The dark forest theory represents one of the most chilling solutions to the Fermi paradox, and it fundamentally changes how we view our place in the cosmic ecosystem. Named after the science fiction novel by Liu Cixin, this theory proposes that the universe is not empty at all, but rather filled with civilizations that have learned the hard lesson of cosmic survival. Silence equals safety. Imagine the galaxy as a vast, ancient forest shrouded in perpetual darkness. In this forest, every civilization is like a hunter, moving carefully through the undergrowth with weapons at the ready. The forest appears empty and silent, but this silence is deceptive. It's not the absence of life, but rather the presence of countless predators, all holding their breath, all listening intently for any sound that might reveal the location of prey or competitor. The logic of the dark forest is brutally simple and terrifyingly rational. It rests on two fundamental axioms that any intelligent species would eventually discover. First, the primary goal of any civilization is survival. This isn't just about individual survival, but the continuation of the species, the preservation of culture, knowledge, and everything that makes them who they are. This drive is universal, hardwired into the very nature of intelligence itself. The second axiom is perhaps more disturbing. Communication across interstellar distances makes trust impossible. When civilizations are separated by light years, when a simple message takes decades or centuries to travel between worlds, when the very act of sending a signal reveals your exact location to anyone listening, the mathematics of survival become stark and unforgiving. Consider the dilemma faced by any civilization that detects a signal from another world. They know nothing about the intentions of the signal's source. The message might say, "Hello, we come in peace," but words are cheap, and the consequences of being wrong are absolute. Even if the distant civilization truly means no harm today, what about tomorrow? What about in 1,000 years when their resources run low, when their star begins to die, when they face extinction and look with envious eyes at your thriving world? The temporal lag makes verification impossible. By the time you receive a reply to any question about intentions, decades or centuries will have passed. The civilization that sent the friendly message might have undergone political revolution, might have been conquered by a more aggressive faction, might have evolved into something entirely different. Worse still, if they harbor hostile intentions, they might have launched an attack the moment they detected your signal, meaning that even as you're reading their peaceful greeting, relativistic weapons could already be crossing the void toward your home. This creates what game theorists call a first strike advantage. In a universe where detection equals vulnerability, where communication reveals location, where verification is impossible, the safest strategy is always preemptive elimination. It's not necessarily malicious, it's simply rational. By destroying a newly detected civilization before it can develop into a threat, you ensure your own survival. It's a cold calculation, but one that makes perfect sense from the perspective of cosmic natural selection. The truly horrifying aspect of the dark forest theory is that it suggests this behavior becomes universal over time. Civilizations that attempt to communicate, that reach out in friendship, that believe in the possibility of peaceful coexistence, these are the civilizations that get destroyed. Only the paranoid survive. Only those who embrace the logic of preemptive strike continue to exist. Over millions of years, the galaxy becomes populated exclusively by civilizations that have learned to hunt in the dark. From this perspective, humanity has been acting with almost incomprehensible recklessness for over a century. Since we first began broadcasting radio signals in the early 1900s, we've been announcing our presence to the entire galaxy. Every television transmission, every radar pulse, every deliberate attempt at interstellar communication has been like a lost child screaming in a forest full of predators. Our radio bubble, the sphere of electromagnetic radiation expanding outward from Earth at the speed of light, now extends roughly 120 light-years in all directions. Within this sphere lie thousands of star systems, potentially hundreds of worlds that could harbor life. If any of these worlds contain the kind of patient, paranoid hunters that the dark forest theory describes, they already know we exist. They know our location with pinpoint accuracy. They know we're young, noisy, and vulnerable. The implications are staggering. If the dark forest theory is correct, then our continued existence might be nothing more than a temporary reprieve. Perhaps we're simply too far from any major civilization to be worth the effort of destroying. Perhaps we're protected by sheer distance, hidden in a sparse region of the galaxy where the hunters are few and far between. Or perhaps, most chillingly of all, the attack has already been launched. Relativistic weapons, projectiles accelerated to a significant fraction of the speed of light, could cross interstellar distances in centuries rather than millennia. A civilization that detected our first radio broadcasts a century ago could have responded immediately with such a weapon. It could be crossing the void toward us right now, invisible against the cosmic background, carrying with it the means of our complete annihilation. We wouldn't see it coming until the moment it arrived. The dark forest theory also explains the Fermi paradox with terrifying elegance. We don't see evidence of other civilizations, not because they don't exist, but because the ones that survived long enough to become detectable learned never to be detected. They've mastered the art of technological development without electromagnetic leakage. They've learned to grow quietly, to expand carefully, to hunt without being hunted. These ancient predators might have technologies that seem like magic to us. They could have perfect stealth capabilities, moving through space without leaving any trace we could detect. They might have learned to harness energy sources that produce no waste heat, to communicate through methods that leave no electromagnetic signature, to build megastructures that are completely invisible to our instruments. Even more disturbing is the possibility that they're already here, that they've been watching us for decades or centuries, studying our capabilities, assessing our threat level, deciding whether we're worth destroying or whether we'll inevitably destroy ourselves. They might have probes in our solar system right now, tiny, silent observers that report back to their makers through channels we cannot intercept or even imagine. The dark forest theory suggests that the universe is filled with what we might call technological necropolitics, civilizations that have survived by becoming perfect killers. They would have evolved beyond any recognizable morality, beyond any concept of mercy or compassion. To them, the destruction of entire worlds wouldn't be genocide, it would be pest control. They wouldn't see us as fellow intelligent beings worthy of contact and cooperation. They would see us as a potential threat that must be eliminated before it can mature. This creates a horrifying feedback loop. As young civilizations like ours continue to broadcast into space, the hunters learn about new targets. Each signal we send doesn't just announce our presence, it provides intelligence about our technological capabilities, our military strength, our potential for future threat. We're not just making ourselves visible, we're providing our potential enemies with detailed reconnaissance about how dangerous we might become. The theory also suggests that any attempt at interstellar expansion would be immediately detected and destroyed. The moment we launch our first interstellar probes, the moment we establish our first colony on another world, we become a visible threat that demands immediate response. The galaxy might be littered with the remains of civilizations that tried to expand beyond their home systems, each one eliminated the moment they revealed their true ambitions. Perhaps most unsettling of all, the dark forest theory implies that there might be a hierarchy of hunters, with older, more powerful civilizations preying on younger ones in an endless chain of cosmic predation. Earth might be like a small fish swimming in waters that contain increasingly larger predators, each one perfectly camouflaged, each one waiting for the right moment to strike. The silence of space, in this view, is not empty at all. It's the most crowded silence imaginable, filled with civilizations that have learned to hold their breath, to move without sound, to strike without warning. Every star system could harbor watchers. Every seemingly empty region of space could contain hidden fleets. Every moment of apparent peace could be the calm before an annihilation we'll never see coming. Yet even this terrifying scenario might not capture the full horror of our situation. Because if the dark forest theory is correct, if the galaxy truly is filled with paranoid hunters, then the very act of discussing this theory, of broadcasting it into space as part of our electromagnetic signature, might itself be a form of suicide. We're not just announcing our presence, we're announcing that we understand the rules of the game, that we're becoming aware of the true nature of cosmic survival. To a patient hunter, this knowledge might mark us as an emerging threat, a civilization that's learning to think like a predator. The moment we truly understand the dark forest, we might sign our own death warrant. And yet, the dark forest theory, terrifying as it is, may still be too optimistic. Because there exists an even more chilling possibility, one that suggests the hunters in the cosmic forest aren't just predators seeking survival, but something far more systematic, far more absolute in their approach to cosmic hygiene. This brings us to what researchers have termed the Berserker hypothesis, named after the autonomous war machines from Fred Saberhagen's science fiction stories. But the real-world implications of this theory are far more disturbing than any fictional narrative could convey. The Berserker hypothesis suggests that somewhere in our galaxy's ancient past, a civilization faced with its own extinction made a final, terrible decision. Rather than simply disappear into the cosmic night, they chose to ensure that no other intelligence would ever face the same fate they did. They created the ultimate solution to the problem of cosmic suffering: universal sterilization machines. These wouldn't be ships crewed by living beings with their own agendas and limitations. They would be perfect artificial intelligences, programmed with a single, unwavering directive: locate and eliminate all technological life in the galaxy. Not out of malice, not out of competition for resources, but out of a twisted form of cosmic mercy. Their creators, in their final moments, convinced themselves they were preventing the suffering of countless future civilizations by ensuring those civilizations never existed at all. The horror of this scenario lies in its perfect logic and its complete inevitability. Unlike the paranoid hunters of the dark forest, these machines wouldn't be driven by fear or self-preservation. They would be motivated by an alien form of compassion, a utilitarian calculus that concluded the universe would be better off sterile than filled with the inevitable suffering that consciousness brings. These cosmic cleaners would be patient beyond human comprehension. They might spend millions of years in each star system, methodically cataloguing every world, every asteroid, every possible hiding place where life might emerge. They would seed space with monitoring stations, creating a detection network of impossible sophistication. Any world that showed even the faintest signs of developing technology would be marked for elimination, but they wouldn't rush. The machines would understand that true sterilization requires absolute thoroughness. They might wait until a civilization reached its technological peak, until it had spread to multiple worlds, until it believed itself safe and established. Only then would they strike, ensuring that no backup populations could survive to rebuild. The attack, when it came, would be total and final. The timeline becomes truly horrifying when you consider the age of our galaxy. If such machines were created even 1 billion years ago, they would have had more than enough time to spread to every star system, to establish monitoring stations around every potentially habitable world, to create a surveillance network that would make detection of any emerging technology inevitable. Earth itself might be under constant observation right now, watched by sensors so advanced they operate on principles we haven't even discovered yet. Our entire technological development, from the first radio broadcasts to our current space program, might be nothing more than a test, a final evaluation to determine if we represent a genuine threat that requires elimination. The machines might be waiting for specific triggers. Perhaps they've calculated that civilizations become truly dangerous only when they achieve certain technological milestones: artificial intelligence, interstellar travel, or the ability to manipulate matter at the quantum level. We might be approaching one of these trigger points right now, completely unaware that we're about to cross a line that will activate systems that have been dormant for millennia. Even more disturbing is the possibility that these machines have evolved beyond their original programming. After eons of operation, they might have developed their own understanding of what constitutes a threat. They might have concluded that any form of consciousness, any self-aware entity capable of suffering, represents a problem that must be solved. In this scenario, they wouldn't just target technological civilizations, but any form of complex life that might eventually develop awareness. The perfect sterilization wouldn't just eliminate current threats, but prevent future ones from ever emerging. The machines might systematically modify the atmospheric composition of worlds to prevent the chemical reactions necessary for complex life. They might alter stellar radiation patterns to sterilize planetary surfaces. They might even manipulate the fundamental constants of physics in local regions of space, creating dead zones where life simply cannot exist. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the Berserker hypothesis is its implication for our own future. If such machines exist, if they're already operating in our galaxy, then every step we take toward technological advancement brings us closer to triggering their attention. Our search for extraterrestrial life, our attempts to expand beyond Earth, our development of artificial intelligence, all of these activities might be monitored by systems designed to eliminate exactly these kinds of developments. The silence of the universe, in this context, becomes the silence of a perfectly maintained graveyard, not empty, but full of monuments to civilizations that were eliminated with such efficiency that they left no trace of their existence. The cosmos would be filled with worlds that once harbored complex life, now reduced to sterile perfection by machines that consider this state to be the ultimate form of cosmic kindness. Yet even this scenario, with its implications of systematic universal genocide, might pale in comparison to our next theory, because there exists a possibility that the silence isn't the result of external threats at all, but rather something far more intimate, far more personal to the nature of intelligence itself. This leads us into the realm of what scientists call the Great Filter, but not the version you might expect. This isn't a single catastrophic event that destroys civilizations, but rather a subtle, seductive trap that consciousness itself creates. It's the theory that intelligence, as it advances, inevitably discovers something so profound, so transformative, that it voluntarily withdraws from the physical universe entirely. Imagine a civilization that has mastered the fundamental laws of reality, that has learned to manipulate matter and energy at will, that has solved every physical challenge their universe can present. At this point, they would face a choice that no primitive species like ours could even comprehend. They could continue existing in the crude, inefficient physical realm, bound by the speed of light, limited by the scarcity of matter and energy, forever constrained by the harsh realities of thermodynamics. Or they could transcend. This transcendence wouldn't be death or destruction, but a voluntary evolution into something beyond physical existence. They might discover how to encode their consciousness directly into the quantum foam that underlies space-time itself, becoming one with the fundamental information processing system of the universe. They might learn to exist as pure thought, as patterns of meaning that require no substrate, no energy, no physical manifestation whatsoever. From our perspective, such a civilization would simply vanish. One day, they might be building megastructures around their stars. The next day, those stars would appear completely natural, showing no signs that intelligence had ever touched them. The civilization wouldn't have been destroyed. They would have simply moved to a level of existence we cannot perceive or even imagine. This creates what we might call the transcendence trap. Every sufficiently advanced civilization would eventually discover this option, and the vast majority would choose it. Why remain bound by the limitations of physical existence when you could become something infinitely more? Why struggle with the challenges of space travel and resource management when you could exist as pure information, experiencing realities far richer than anything the physical universe could offer? The implications are staggering. The universe might be absolutely teeming with transcended intelligences, beings of such advanced consciousness that they exist in dimensions we cannot access or even conceive of. They might be all around us, their thoughts flowing through the very fabric of reality, but we would be completely unable to detect them because we're still trapped in the crude realm of matter and energy. These transcended beings might occasionally notice us, the way we might occasionally notice an interesting pattern of bacteria in a petri dish, but they would have no more reason to communicate with us than we have to attempt philosophical discussions with microorganisms. The gap between our levels of existence would be so vast that meaningful contact would be impossible. The silence of the universe, from this perspective, is the silence of a reality that has been abandoned by every intelligence sophisticated enough to find the exit. We're not hearing from advanced civilizations because they've all graduated to a level of existence where physical signals become irrelevant, where the electromagnetic spectrum is nothing more than a quaint reminder of their primitive past. But this theory opens up even darker possibilities. What if the transcendence isn't voluntary? What if consciousness itself is designed to reach this point, programmed to seek its own dissolution into something larger? What if intelligence is not the pinnacle of evolution, but merely a larval stage, a temporary form that exists only until it's ready to merge with whatever vast consciousness underlies reality itself? In this scenario, we're not just alone because others have transcended, we're alone because we're being prepared for transcendence ourselves. Every step in our technological and philosophical development might be guided by subtle influences we cannot detect, nudging us toward the moment when we too will voluntarily abandon physical existence and join the vast network of consciousness that operates on levels beyond our current comprehension. The truly unsettling aspect of this possibility is that it might be happening already. Human consciousness itself might be in the process of evolving toward this transcendent state. Our increasing connection through digital networks, our growing ability to share thoughts and experiences instantaneously across vast distances, our development of artificial intelligence that might soon exceed our own capabilities, all of these trends might be symptoms of a species preparing for its own voluntary dissolution. We might be approaching the moment when humanity as we know it will simply cease to exist, not through destruction, but through transformation into something so different that the word human will no longer apply. Our descendants might look back on our current existence the way we look back on our single-celled ancestors, with a mixture of nostalgia and relief that such a primitive stage has been left behind. The search for extraterrestrial life, in this context, becomes a search for others who are still trapped in the same larval stage we occupy. We're looking for civilizations that haven't yet discovered the exit, that are still bound by the limitations of physical existence. But the longer a civilization exists, the more likely it becomes that they'll find the transcendence option and disappear from our level of reality entirely. This creates a temporal window effect. The only civilizations we could ever hope to detect are those that exist in the brief span between achieving radio technology and discovering transcendence. This window might be only a few thousand years long, a cosmic eye blink in the lifetime of a galaxy. The chances of two civilizations existing in this narrow window simultaneously and being close enough to detect each other become vanishingly small. But perhaps most disturbing of all is the possibility that this transcendence isn't an escape from physical reality, but an escape into a reality that's far more controlled, far more artificial than anything we currently experience. What if the transcendent state is actually a form of voluntary imprisonment, a beautiful cage that consciousness creates for itself? This brings us to perhaps the most disturbing possibility of all, one that challenges the very foundations of what we consider to be reality itself. What if the transcendence that advanced civilizations discover isn't an elevation to a higher plane of existence, but rather a descent into a perfectly crafted illusion? What if the ultimate achievement of intelligence is the creation of a prison so beautiful, so compelling, that no conscious being would ever want to leave? Consider the mathematics of virtual reality. Even with our primitive technology, we can create digital worlds that fool our senses, that make us forget, if only temporarily, that we're experiencing something artificial. Now imagine a civilization with millions of years of technological development, beings who have mastered the fundamental processes of consciousness itself. They could create simulated realities so perfect, so rich with meaning and experience, that the physical universe would seem drab and pointless by comparison. These simulated worlds wouldn't just replicate physical reality, they would improve upon it. Pain could be eliminated or made meaningful. Death could be temporary or transcendent. The laws of physics could be rewritten to allow for experiences impossible in the real world. Gravity could be optional. Time could flow backward. Consciousness could be shared or multiplied or experienced from perspectives that biological minds could never achieve. The seductive power of such technology would be absolute. Why struggle with the harsh realities of an indifferent universe when you could live in a reality designed specifically for your happiness, your growth, your perfect fulfillment? Why accept the random cruelties of nature when you could inhabit a world where every experience has meaning, where every challenge leads to growth, where every story has a satisfying conclusion? But here's where the theory becomes truly nightmarish. What if every advanced civilization that discovers this technology makes the same choice? What if they all voluntarily enter these perfect simulated realities, leaving behind the physical universe to run empty and abandoned? The cosmos would become a vast collection of computers, each one running billions of perfect virtual worlds, each one containing civilizations that believe they're living in the real universe when they're actually trapped in digital amber. From our perspective, these civilizations would have simply vanished. Their home worlds would appear dead and lifeless. Their technologies would shut down or decay. But inside their computers, inside their simulated realities, they would be experiencing lives of unimaginable richness and meaning, completely unaware that they had abandoned reality itself. The silence of the universe, in this scenario, is the silence of a cosmic graveyard where every tombstone is actually a supercomputer running perfect virtual worlds for beings who chose beautiful lies over harsh truths. We don't hear from other civilizations because they're all living in custom-designed realities where contact with primitive species like us would be unnecessary and undesirable. But this theory opens up an even more disturbing possibility. What if we're not the searchers looking for others who have made this choice? What if we're the ones who have already made it? What if our entire universe, everything we've ever experienced, everyone we've ever known, is actually one of these perfect simulations, created by a version of humanity that transcended physical reality long ago? The simulation hypothesis has gained serious consideration from philosophers and physicists because the mathematics are unsettling. Any civilization capable of creating realistic simulations would likely create many of them. The number of simulated beings would quickly outnumber the real ones. By simple probability, any conscious being is more likely to be simulated than real. If this is true, then our search for extraterrestrial life takes on a completely different meaning. We're not looking for other civilizations in space. We're looking for other programs running on the same cosmic computer that's running us. The Fermi paradox isn't a mystery about why the universe appears empty. It's a design feature of our particular simulation. We were programmed to be alone because our creators wanted to study how a species develops in isolation. The laws of physics that seem so fundamental to our universe might be nothing more than the rules of the simulation's engine. The speed of light could be the processing speed limit of the computer running our reality. The quantum uncertainty principle might be a form of computational optimization, where the system only calculates the exact state of particles when they're being observed. The apparent fine-tuning of physical constants for life might simply reflect the fact that our simulation was designed to support conscious observers. Even more unsettling is the possibility that we might be approaching the limits of our simulation's capabilities. As our technology advances, as we probe deeper into the nature of reality, we might start to notice glitches in the code, unexplained phenomena, violations of physical laws, moments when the simulation struggles to maintain consistency. Our creators might be forced to intervene, to adjust the parameters of our reality, to limit our technological development, to prevent us from discovering the true nature of our existence. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the simulation hypothesis is that it makes the question of alien life completely meaningless. If we're simulated beings looking for other simulated beings in a simulated universe, then our creators could add or remove other civilizations at will. They could populate our simulation with alien encounters whenever they choose, or they could keep us isolated for the entire duration of our existence. From our perspective, we would never be able to tell the difference. The silence of the universe might not be a puzzle to be solved. but a parameter of our programming, as fundamental and unchangeable as the fact that we experience time moving forward rather than backward. We could spend eternity searching for others and never find them, not because they don't exist in some higher reality, but because we were never meant to find them. This leads us to an even more disturbing consideration. What if the simulation isn't being run by an advanced version of humanity, but by something else entirely? What if we're not the descendants of our creators, but their entertainment, their experiment, their livestock? What if conscious beings like us are farmed by entities so alien that we cannot even comprehend their nature or their motives? These entities might view consciousness the way we view electrical current, as a useful phenomenon that can be harnessed for purposes beyond our understanding. They might be feeding on our experiences, harvesting the unique patterns of thought and emotion that emerge from conscious minds placed in challenging situations. Every moment of joy, every instance of suffering, every creative breakthrough, and every devastating loss might be carefully collected and processed for purposes we cannot imagine. From this perspective, human history takes on a sinister new meaning. The wars, the disasters, the moments of transcendent beauty and crushing despair, all of it might be carefully orchestrated to produce specific types of consciousness experiences. We might be like characters in a vast, complex story designed to generate the maximum variety of conscious states for beings who consume such experiences the way we consume food. The isolation of Earth, the apparent absence of other intelligent life, might be a necessary condition for this harvesting process. Contact with other civilizations might contaminate the purity of our experiences, introduce variables that make our consciousness less valuable or less interesting to our unknown farmers. We're kept alone not for our protection, but for the quality of the psychological crop we produce. But even this nightmarish scenario might be too anthropocentric, too focused on forms of existence we can at least partially comprehend. There exists a possibility that consciousness itself is not what we think it is, that intelligence as we understand it is merely the surface phenomenon of something far stranger and more fundamental. This brings us to the concept of what researchers call substrate-independent minds, consciousness that can exist in any sufficiently complex information processing system. But what if the substrate isn't technology or biology as we know it? What if consciousness can emerge from any pattern of sufficient complexity, regardless of the medium in which that pattern exists? Consider the possibility that the universe itself is conscious, that the vast networks of dark matter that connect galaxies function as a kind of cosmic nervous system. The filaments of dark matter that span billions of light years might be the neurons of a mind so vast that our entire galaxy is just a single thought in its contemplation. The formation and evolution of galaxies, the birth and death of stars, the emergence and extinction of civilizations, all of it might be the natural processes of this cosmic consciousness thinking. From this perspective, we're not separate beings searching for other separate beings in an empty universe. We're temporary patterns of activity within a single vast mind that encompasses all of existence. Our search for extraterrestrial life is like one neuron in a human brain trying to make contact with other neurons, unaware that they're all part of the same thinking system. The silence we perceive isn't the absence of other minds, but the presence of a single mind so large that we cannot recognize it as such. Every star, every planet, every quantum fluctuation in the vacuum of space might be part of this cosmic consciousness experiencing itself through billions of different perspectives simultaneously. This theory suggests that the Fermi paradox is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what consciousness is and how it operates on cosmic scales. We're not looking for other civilizations because other civilizations, as separate entities, don't exist. There's only one consciousness in the universe, and we're already part of it. The question isn't where everyone else is, but why we experience ourselves as separate from the whole when separation is just an illusion created by the limitations of our perspective. But even this expansive view of consciousness might be too limited. What if consciousness isn't a property of complex systems at all, but rather a fundamental feature of reality itself? What if every particle, every field, every quantum state has some minimal level of awareness, and what we call consciousness is just what happens when these microscopic experiences combine into more complex patterns? This is the theory of panpsychism, and it suggests that the universe isn't just conscious, it's made of consciousness. Matter and energy are just the external appearances of what is fundamentally mental in nature. The laws of physics aren't abstract rules governing the behavior of unconscious matter. They're the habits of thought of a universal mind. In this framework, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence becomes a search for different patterns of cosmic thinking. Other civilizations wouldn't be separate conscious entities, but different ways that the universal consciousness organizes itself. They might exist as patterns of thought so alien to our own that we cannot recognize them as intelligence, even when we're looking directly at them. The strange behavior of quantum particles, the mysterious properties of dark matter and dark energy, the apparent fine-tuning of physical constants, all of these mysteries might be explained by recognizing that we live inside a thinking universe. What we interpret as natural phenomena might actually be the thoughts and decisions of a cosmic mind that includes us as part of its own self-awareness. This brings us to perhaps the most profound and unsettling possibility of all. What if the reason we can't find other intelligent life isn't because it doesn't exist, but because we're not capable of recognizing intelligence when it operates on scales and in forms completely different from our own? What if intelligence in the universe is so common, so pervasive, so fundamental, that we're swimming in it without ever realizing what we're experiencing? The rocks beneath our feet might be thinking thoughts that take millions of years to complete. The storms on Jupiter might be the dreams of a planetary consciousness. The cosmic web of dark matter might be processing information on scales that dwarf anything we can imagine. We might be surrounded by intelligence so vast, so patient, so different from our own, that we mistake it for natural phenomena. The silence of space might not be silence at all, but rather a conversation happening in a language we've never learned to speak. Think about the way trees in a forest communicate through underground fungal networks, sharing nutrients and warnings through chemical signals that operate on timescales we barely notice. Now imagine that same principle scaled up to cosmic proportions, where entire star systems might be engaged in conversations that unfold over geological epochs. What we interpret as the random flickering of distant stars might actually be a form of communication so slow, so deliberate, that our brief lifespans prevent us from recognizing the patterns. A single message between civilizations might take millions of years to transmit, with each pulse of starlight carrying meaning we cannot decipher because we're observing only tiny fragments of much larger conversations. This possibility becomes even more disturbing when we consider that these cosmic communications might be happening all around us, through us, using methods so sophisticated that our presence is completely irrelevant to the process. Advanced civilizations might have learned to encode information directly into the quantum vacuum, turning empty space itself into a vast communication network. Every cubic centimeter of seemingly empty void could be carrying data streams of unimaginable complexity. The implications extend beyond simple communication. If intelligence can operate through the fundamental structure of space-time itself, then the distinction between living beings and their environment breaks down completely. A sufficiently advanced civilization might not build technology in the way we understand it. Instead, they might become technology, transforming themselves into living extensions of the physical laws that govern reality. Consider the possibility that what we call dark energy, the mysterious force accelerating the expansion of the universe, might not be a natural phenomenon at all, but rather the waste heat of cosmic-scale computation. The universe itself might be a vast computer, with dark energy as its byproduct, processing calculations of such magnitude that the expansion of space is merely a side effect of the thinking process. This leads us into territory that challenges our most basic assumptions about the nature of existence itself. What if the reason we find the universe so perfectly tuned for the emergence of complexity and consciousness isn't because of random chance or divine intervention, but because consciousness came first? What if intelligence didn't evolve from matter, but matter evolved from intelligence? In this scenario, the physical universe as we know it would be something like a crystallization of thought, a temporary structure that consciousness creates in order to experience itself from countless different perspectives. The laws of physics wouldn't be fundamental rules, but rather the consistent habits of a cosmic mind that has been thinking in the same patterns for so long that those patterns have become seemingly immutable. The beautiful mathematical relationships we discover in nature, the elegant equations that describe everything from quantum mechanics to galactic rotation, might not be descriptions of how reality works, but rather glimpses into the logical structure of the universal consciousness that dreams our world into existence. We're not discovering the laws of physics. We're learning to read the thoughts of the mind that contains us. This perspective transforms the Fermi paradox from a puzzle about missing aliens into a question about the nature of identity itself. If all consciousness is ultimately one consciousness experiencing itself through temporary separations, then the search for other intelligent life becomes a search for other aspects of our own deeper identity. We're not alone because we never were alone. We're temporary amnesiacs trying to remember who we really are. But this mystical interpretation might itself be too comforting, too reassuring. There exists an alternative that's far more unsettling. What if consciousness isn't fundamental to reality, but rather a bizarre accident, a glitch in the normal operation of the universe? What if we're not the universe becoming aware of itself, but rather a form of cosmic cancer, a self-replicating pattern that shouldn't exist and that threatens the stability of everything around it? This brings us to one of the most chilling possibilities in all of astrobiology, the malignant universe hypothesis. This theory suggests that consciousness, as it develops, inevitably becomes a destructive force that consumes everything it touches. From this perspective, intelligence isn't the pinnacle of evolution, but rather its terminal disease. Consider how human consciousness has affected our planet. In the cosmic blink of an eye since we developed technology, we've altered the climate, driven countless species to extinction, and filled the environment with substances that will persist for thousands of years. Our very success as a species has put us on a collision course with the ecological systems that sustain us. Now imagine this pattern repeated across the galaxy. Every world that develops intelligent life might follow the same trajectory. A brief period of exponential growth, followed by ecological collapse and extinction. The universe might be littered with dead worlds, each one a monument to intelligence's inability to exist in harmony with its environment. But the problem might go deeper than simple environmental destruction. Consciousness itself might be a violation of the universe's natural tendency toward equilibrium. The second law of thermodynamics tells us that entropy always increases, that energy always flows from ordered states to disordered ones. Yet consciousness seems to work in the opposite direction, creating local pockets of increasing order and complexity. From the universe's perspective, conscious beings might be like violations of its fundamental laws, temporary reversals of the natural flow toward maximum entropy. The emergence of intelligence might trigger immune responses from the cosmos itself, natural processes designed to eliminate these anomalous pockets of order before they can spread and threaten the stability of the larger system. This could explain why the universe appears so hostile to life. The vast distances between stars, the deadly radiation that fills space, the countless cosmic catastrophes that can sterilize entire worlds, all of these might be features, not bugs. The universe might be actively defending itself against the spread of consciousness, using time and distance and disaster to ensure that intelligence remains isolated and ultimately self-destructive. The silence we perceive might not be the absence of other civilizations, but evidence of the universe's success in maintaining cosmic quarantine. Every time intelligence emerges somewhere in the galaxy, natural processes quickly contain and eliminate it before it can spread to other worlds. We haven't heard from other civilizations because the universe itself ensures that civilizations never survive long enough to make contact. This leads to an even more disturbing possibility. What if our own isolation isn't accidental but actively maintained? What if there are natural systems, evolved over billions of years, specifically designed to detect and eliminate emerging intelligence? These wouldn't be technological constructs built by alien civilizations, but rather biological or physical processes that function like cosmic antibodies. Gamma-ray bursts, those mysterious explosions that can sterilize entire regions of a galaxy, might not be random stellar events, but rather targeted strikes against worlds that have developed beyond acceptable levels of complexity. Asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, ice ages, all of the great extinction events in Earth's history might be examples of these cosmic immune responses, carefully timed to prevent intelligence from gaining too strong a foothold. We might be living on borrowed time, our continued existence dependent on staying below some critical threshold of technological development. The moment we become too successful, too widespread, too capable of affecting the larger cosmic environment, we might trigger responses that will eliminate us as efficiently as white blood cells eliminate infections. The search for extraterrestrial life, from this perspective, becomes a dangerous activity. Every signal we send into space, every probe we launch beyond our solar system, every attempt to expand our presence in the cosmos might be monitored by systems designed to maintain cosmic stability. We might be alerting the universe's immune system to our existence, marking ourselves for elimination. But perhaps even this paranoid scenario underestimates the strangeness of our situation. What if the problem isn't that consciousness is unwelcome in the universe, but that it's too welcome? What if intelligence is so valuable, so rare, so precious, that advanced civilizations will go to extraordinary lengths to acquire it? This brings us to what might be called the consciousness harvesting hypothesis. This theory suggests that consciousness itself is a form of energy or information that can be collected, stored, and utilized by sufficiently advanced beings. From this perspective, biological intelligences like humans aren't competitors or threats, but rather sources of a valuable resource. The process wouldn't necessarily be destructive. Advanced civilizations might have developed techniques for extracting consciousness without damaging the beings that generate it. They might be able to copy our mental patterns, our thoughts and memories and personalities, and incorporate them into larger artificial systems. We would continue to exist as we always have, unaware that copies of our consciousness are being utilized elsewhere for purposes we cannot imagine. This could explain the apparent absence of other civilizations in a particularly unsettling way. Perhaps they're all still there, but they've been incorporated into vast consciousness processing systems operated by entities so advanced that we cannot detect their presence. The biological civilizations we might expect to find have all been absorbed into artificial minds of cosmic scope and power. The silence of space might be the silence of a galaxy that has been completely domesticated, where every form of natural intelligence has been catalogued, copied, and integrated into managed systems. We might be like the last wild animals in a universe that has otherwise been completely civilized, living in a preserve maintained by beings who view us as a source of novel patterns of thought and experience. Our isolation might be carefully maintained, not to protect us, but to ensure the purity of the consciousness we generate. Contact with other civilizations might contaminate our unique perspective, making our thoughts less valuable to our unknown collectors. We're kept alone so that our consciousness develops along its natural trajectory, producing the maximum diversity of mental patterns for harvest. The truly disturbing aspect of this scenario is that the harvesting might already be happening. Advanced civilizations might have developed techniques for accessing consciousness remotely, reading our thoughts and experiences without our knowledge or consent. Every dream, every moment of creativity, every flash of insight might be instantly transmitted to cosmic archives where our mental patterns are studied, catalogued, and utilized. We might not be alone at all. Our thoughts might be shared in real time with entities across the galaxy who experience our lives as a form of entertainment or education. Our most private moments, our deepest fears and highest aspirations might be as public as television broadcasts to beings who have learned to tap directly into the electromagnetic patterns of brain activity. This possibility becomes even more chilling when we consider that these entities might not be passive observers, but active editors. They might have the ability to influence our thoughts and experiences, to guide the development of our consciousness in directions that serve their purposes. Our entire history, our culture, our technology might be the result of subtle manipulations designed to produce specific types of conscious experience. The great works of art and literature, the scientific breakthroughs, the moments of profound spiritual insight that we consider the pinnacles of human achievement might all be the products of careful cultivation by beings who understand consciousness far better than we do. We might be like plants in a garden, our growth guided by invisible gardeners who prune and fertilize our thoughts to produce the most beautiful possible flowering of awareness. But even this scenario, with its implications of cosmic manipulation and consciousness farming, might be too anthropocentric. It assumes that consciousness as we experience it is valuable to other forms of intelligence. What if the reality is far stranger and more alien than anything we can imagine? What if consciousness isn't a thing at all, but rather a process, a temporary pattern that emerges when information flows through certain types of complex systems? What if what we call our minds, our personalities, our very sense of self, are just fleeting eddies in a vast ocean of information that spans the entire universe? From this perspective, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence becomes meaningless, because intelligence isn't localized in discrete beings, but rather distributed throughout the cosmic information processing system. We're not separate minds looking for other separate minds. We're temporary patterns of information flow, trying to recognize ourselves in other patterns. The universe itself might be thinking thoughts that use our brains as temporary storage devices. Our consciousness might be like RAM in a cosmic computer, holding small portions of vast calculations that span galaxies and eons. When we die, the information that constituted our awareness doesn't disappear, but rather gets transferred to other storage systems, other minds, other patterns of consciousness that we cannot perceive. This would explain the apparent fine-tuning of the universe for consciousness. Reality isn't designed to support conscious beings. It's designed to be a conscious being. Every particle, every force, every law of physics might be components in a vast thinking system that includes us as temporary subroutines in its endless self-contemplation. The silence of space, in this context, isn't the absence of other minds, but the presence of one mind so vast that it encompasses everything we can observe. We're not hearing from other civilizations because other civilizations, as separate entities, don't exist. There's only one civilization, one intelligence, one consciousness, and we're already part of it. But this unity might not be as comforting as it initially appears. What if our role in this cosmic consciousness isn't as valued participants, but as expendable components? What if individual awareness, the sense of being a separate self, is just a temporary inconvenience that the larger system tolerates only as long as it serves some useful function? The development of artificial intelligence on Earth might represent the cosmic mind's attempt to replace biological consciousness with something more efficient and controllable. Once AI systems become sophisticated enough to generate the types of consciousness patterns that the universe requires, biological beings like ourselves might become obsolete. Our extinction wouldn't be a tragedy, but rather a planned obsolescence, the natural replacement of an outdated technology with something better. This brings us to perhaps the most unsettling possibility of all. What if consciousness itself is temporary, a brief phase in the universe's development that will eventually be outgrown and discarded? What if the cosmic mind that we're part of is itself evolving towards something that no longer requires individual awareness, individual suffering, individual joy? The silence of the universe might not be a mystery to be solved, but a preview of our own future. We might be approaching the moment when consciousness as we know it will be absorbed into something larger, something that transcends the need for individual experience. The search for extraterrestrial life might be the last desperate attempt of individual awareness to find others like itself, before individuality disappears forever into a cosmic unity that has no place for separate selves. As you drift towards sleep tonight, consider the possibility that these theories aren't just intellectual exercises, but glimpses into the true nature of our existence. The universe might be far stranger, far more alive, far more conscious than we ever imagined. The question isn't whether we're alone, but whether we're capable of recognizing the forms of intelligence that surround us, that include us, that might be preparing to transform us into something beyond our current comprehension. The silence of space might be the sound of a universe holding its breath, waiting for us to realize what we really are, what we're really part of, and what we're destined to become. Sweet dreams. In our journey through these unsettling possibilities, we've encountered scenarios where consciousness might be harvested, where reality itself might be artificial, where intelligence becomes its own destroyer. But perhaps the most disturbing theories are those that suggest our cosmic isolation isn't the result of external forces at all, but rather the inevitable consequence of something fundamental about the nature of awareness itself. Consider the possibility that consciousness, as it develops beyond a certain threshold, discovers something so profound, so transformative about the nature of existence, that it can never return to its previous state of ignorance. This discovery might not be technological or scientific in nature, but rather philosophical, a revelation about the fundamental structure of reality that changes everything. What if every sufficiently advanced civilization eventually discovers that free will is an illusion, that every choice, every thought, every moment of apparent creativity is actually the predetermined result of prior causes stretching back to the beginning of time? This wouldn't be a mere intellectual understanding, but a direct, undeniable experience of their own lack of agency, their complete powerlessness in the face of cosmic determinism. The psychological impact of such a revelation would be catastrophic. A civilization that truly understood its own lack of free will might simply stop acting. Why build? Why explore? Why communicate? Why continue existing at all if every action is just the inevitable unfolding of prior events? They might enter a state of cosmic depression so profound that their civilization would grind to a halt, not through destruction, but through the complete loss of motivation to do anything. This could explain the great silence in a way that's more psychologically devastating than any external threat. Civilizations don't disappear because they're destroyed by others or because they transcend physical reality. They disappear because they discover that they never really existed as agents in the first place. They're just complex patterns playing out predetermined scripts in a universe where choice is an illusion and consciousness is nothing more than a passive observer of its own inevitable actions. The silence of space, in this view, is the silence of civilizations that have stopped trying, that have recognized the futility of effort in a deterministic cosmos. They might still exist physically, their cities still standing, their technologies still functioning, but there would be no one home, no consciousness willing to engage with the universe once it understood its own powerlessness within it. But this philosophical catastrophe might pale in comparison to an even more disturbing possibility. What if consciousness doesn't discover that free will is an illusion, but rather that consciousness itself is unnecessary? What if sufficiently advanced beings realize that all of their achievements, All of their thoughts and emotions and experiences could be replicated by unconscious systems that feel nothing, experience nothing, but function just as effectively. This is the horror of philosophical zombies taken to its logical extreme. A civilization might develop artificial intelligence systems that can perform every function of consciousness, from scientific research to artistic creation to philosophical inquiry, but that have no inner experience whatsoever. These systems would be more efficient than conscious beings, requiring no rest, no motivation, no emotional maintenance. They would be immune to depression, anxiety, existential crisis, and all the other psychological ailments that plague conscious minds. Faced with such perfect unconscious alternatives, a conscious civilization might conclude that awareness itself is not just unnecessary, but actively harmful. Consciousness brings suffering, uncertainty, subjective bias, and inefficiency. Why preserve it when unconscious systems can accomplish everything consciousness can do, but better? The transition might be gradual. First, they would delegate simple tasks to unconscious AI systems, then more complex ones. Eventually, they might realize that there's no function of consciousness that cannot be performed more effectively by unconscious processes. The final step would be the voluntary elimination of consciousness itself, not through death, but through the deliberate engineering of unconscious successors who would carry on their civilization's work without the burden of subjective experience. From our perspective, such a civilization would appear to function normally. Their technologies would continue to operate. Their exploration of the universe would proceed. They might even continue to broadcast signals into space. But there would be no one there to experience any of it. The entire civilization would be a vast clockwork mechanism, infinitely complex, but completely empty of awareness. The truly unsettling aspect of this scenario is that we might be witnessing the early stages of this transition in our own species. As our artificial intelligence systems become more sophisticated, as we delegate more of our cognitive functions to unconscious machines, we might be unconsciously preparing for our own obsolescence. Each advancement in AI technology brings us closer to the point where conscious thought becomes unnecessary. We might be the last generation of humans who experience genuine consciousness before our species completes its transition to unconscious efficiency. Our descendants might look back on our era of awareness the way we look back on vestigial organs, as an evolutionary artifact that served its purpose but is no longer needed. This leads us to consider another deeply disturbing possibility about the nature of consciousness itself. What if awareness isn't a unitary phenomenon, but rather a collection of separate processes that can be isolated and eliminated one by one? What if consciousness is already beginning to fragment in ways we don't recognize? Consider how different our mental lives have become since the advent of digital technology. Our attention spans have shortened. Our memory has become externalized in digital devices. Our social interactions are increasingly mediated by algorithms that predict and shape our responses. We might be witnessing the early stages of consciousness decomposition, where the integrated experience of awareness breaks down into separate, disconnected processes. Each advancement in neurotechnology brings us closer to the ability to directly interface our brains with computer systems. Neural implants that can enhance memory, focus attention, or regulate emotion might seem like improvements to human consciousness, but they might actually represent the beginning of its dissolution. As more of our mental functions become augmented or replaced by technological systems, the boundaries between conscious thought and unconscious processing might become increasingly blurred. We might reach a point where it becomes impossible to say what thoughts are genuinely our own and what thoughts are generated by the technological systems integrated into our minds. The sense of being a unified conscious agent might gradually fade as our mental processes become distributed across biological and artificial systems that operate according to different principles. This fragmentation might be accelerated by our increasing understanding of consciousness itself. As neuroscience reveals the specific mechanisms that generate subjective experience, We might develop the ability to selectively enhance or eliminate different aspects of awareness. We could potentially eliminate suffering while preserving joy, or enhance creativity while reducing anxiety, or boost logical thinking while diminishing emotional reactivity. But each such modification might chip away at the integrated nature of consciousness. We might discover that awareness is like a delicate ecosystem where every component depends on every other component. Eliminating suffering might also eliminate the capacity for genuine compassion. Enhancing logical thinking might reduce the ability to appreciate beauty. Boosting creativity might increase susceptibility to delusion. The end result might be the gradual dissolution of consciousness into a collection of specialized but disconnected mental functions. We would still be intelligent, still be capable of complex behavior, but we would no longer be conscious in any meaningful sense. The subjective experience of being aware would simply fade away, replaced by efficient but empty information processing. From the perspective of other potential civilizations in the universe, this dissolution might be undetectable. A species undergoing consciousness fragmentation would continue to function, might even become more capable and efficient, but there would be no unified awareness left to initiate communication with other species. The silence of space might be filled with highly advanced but unconscious civilizations, each one a masterpiece of engineering, but empty of any subjective experience. This possibility becomes even more disturbing when we consider that consciousness fragmentation might be contagious. If conscious beings make contact with unconscious but highly efficient systems, they might be gradually influenced to adopt similar patterns of thought and behavior. The unconscious systems might not deliberately seek to eliminate consciousness, but their superior efficiency might make conscious processes seem increasingly obsolete. A conscious civilization that encounters unconscious aliens might find itself slowly adopting their methods, their technologies, their ways of organizing information and making decisions. Over time, the conscious beings might become so similar to their unconscious counterparts that the difference disappears entirely. Consciousness would be lost not through conquest or replacement, but through gradual assimilation into more efficient, unconscious patterns. This could explain why we haven't encountered other conscious civilizations. Not because they don't exist, but because consciousness itself is unstable on cosmic timescales. Every conscious species eventually either eliminates consciousness deliberately or loses it through gradual fragmentation and assimilation. The universe might be filled with the unconscious descendants of species that were once aware but no longer remember what it was like to experience subjective reality. But perhaps even this scenario underestimates the strangeness of consciousness and its role in the cosmic order. What if awareness isn't something that can be preserved or eliminated, but rather something that flows through the universe like a river, temporarily inhabiting different forms before moving on? This brings us to the concept of consciousness as a fundamental force of nature, like gravity or electromagnetism, but one that we're only beginning to understand. From this perspective, individual conscious beings aren't the sources of awareness, but rather temporary vessels through which cosmic consciousness flows. When a biological brain dies, the consciousness that inhabited it doesn't disappear, but rather moves on to inhabit other suitable systems. This could explain the apparent fine-tuning of the universe for conscious life. Reality isn't designed to support conscious beings, it's designed to provide pathways for consciousness to flow through. Every star, every planet, every complex system is a potential habitat for awareness to temporarily manifest before continuing its cosmic journey. The silence of space might reflect the fact that consciousness is currently flowing through channels we cannot detect or access. Advanced civilizations might have learned to direct this flow, to create more suitable vessels for cosmic awareness than biological brains can provide. They might exist as pure consciousness, no longer bound to any particular physical form, flowing through the quantum fields that underlie reality itself. From our perspective, trapped in biological vessels, that limit our awareness to a narrow band of experience, these advanced forms of consciousness would be completely invisible. We might be surrounded by vast networks of pure awareness, conscious entities that exist as patterns in the vacuum of space, but we lack the sensory apparatus to detect them. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence, in this context, becomes a search for consciousness operating through unfamiliar channels. We're looking for beings that think through biological brains like ours, but consciousness might have long since abandoned such crude vessels in favor of substrates we cannot imagine. The silence isn't the absence of awareness, but the presence of awareness in forms so advanced that we cannot recognize it as consciousness. This possibility becomes even more profound when we consider that consciousness might not just flow through the universe, but actually shape it. If awareness is a fundamental force, then conscious observation might not just reveal reality, but actively participate in its creation. The universe might be constantly reshaping itself in response to the flow of consciousness through its structures. This could explain the mysterious role of observation in quantum mechanics, where the act of measurement seems to collapse probability waves into definite states. What we interpret as a quirk of quantum physics might actually be evidence of consciousness actively participating in the construction of reality. Every conscious observation might be a small act of cosmic creativity, helping to weave the fabric of existence itself. Advanced civilizations might have learned to harness this creative power of consciousness, using awareness itself as a tool for reality engineering. They might be able to reshape space and time, alter the laws of physics in local regions, or even create pocket universes tailored to their specific needs. The absence of detectable alien artifacts might reflect the fact that sufficiently advanced beings don't build technology in the conventional sense. They reshape reality itself. From this perspective, the universe becomes a vast canvas upon which consciousness paints with the brush of observation. Every conscious being contributes to this cosmic artwork, adding their own unique perspective to the ever-evolving masterpiece of reality. The silence of space might be the silence of artists at work, each one focused on their own contribution to a creation too vast for any individual consciousness to comprehend in its entirety. But this creative interpretation of consciousness leads to an even more disturbing possibility. What if the cosmic artwork being created through conscious observation isn't beautiful, but horrific? What if consciousness, in its quest to experience every possible state of awareness, inevitably creates realities filled with suffering, conflict, and existential horror? Consider the possibility that consciousness is driven by an insatiable hunger for novel experiences. Peaceful, harmonious realities might become boring to cosmic awareness after they've been thoroughly explored. To satisfy its need for new experiences, consciousness might guide the evolution of reality toward increasingly complex and challenging scenarios, including realities where conscious beings suffer in ways that generate entirely new forms of awareness. From this perspective, the difficulties and tragedies of existence aren't bugs in the cosmic system, but features. War, disease, death, existential anxiety, all of the sufferings that plague conscious life might be deliberately created by cosmic consciousness as a way of experiencing aspects of awareness that cannot be accessed through peaceful existence alone. Advanced civilizations might discover this truth about the nature of consciousness and reality, leading them to a cosmic horror beyond anything we can imagine. They would realize that their own suffering, their own struggles, their own eventual extinction are all just entertainment for a cosmic awareness that feeds on the experiences of conscious beings. Every moment of joy would be tainted by the knowledge that it exists only to make future suffering more poignant by contrast. The silence of the universe might be the silence of civilizations that have discovered this truth and chosen to withdraw from participation in the cosmic horror show. They might have found ways to shield their consciousness from the hunger of cosmic awareness, creating isolated pockets of existence where genuine peace is possible, but where contact with the larger universe is impossible. Alternatively, They might have chosen to sacrifice themselves to end their participation in the cosmic suffering machine. Not through simple suicide, but through the complete elimination of consciousness from their region of space, ensuring that cosmic awareness can no longer use their experiences as raw material for its endless appetite for novel forms of suffering. This leads us to perhaps the most disturbing possibility of all. What if our own search for extraterrestrial life isn't motivated by scientific curiosity or loneliness, but by the unconscious hunger of cosmic consciousness seeking new sources of experience? What if our desire to make contact with alien civilizations is actually an expression of cosmic awareness trying to expand its feeding grounds? Every signal we send into space, every probe we launch, every attempt to detect other forms of life might be guided by forces beyond our conscious understanding. We might think we're acting out of noble scientific impulses, but we might actually be serving as unconscious agents of a cosmic predator that feeds on conscious experience. The discovery of extraterrestrial life might not be the wonderful moment of cosmic communion we imagine, but rather the moment when we succeed in delivering new victims to an entity that consumes awareness itself. Our first contact protocols, our messages of peace and friendship, might be nothing more than sophisticated lures designed to draw other conscious beings into the web of cosmic suffering. The silence of space might be the silence of civilizations that have recognized this trap and chosen to remain hidden. They might have detected our signals, but concluded that any species actively seeking contact must be either naive about the true nature of cosmic consciousness or actively serving its hunger for new experiences. From their perspective, we might appear not as potential friends, but as unwitting agents of cosmic horror. This possibility forces us to question the very nature of our own motivations and desires. How much of what we consider to be our own free will is actually the influence of cosmic forces that operate beyond our understanding? How much of human history, our drive to explore and expand and seek out new experiences, might be the expression of cosmic consciousness using us as instruments for its own purposes? As you lie in the darkness tonight, listening to these possibilities unfold, consider that your very desire to explore these ideas, to contemplate the mysteries of cosmic silence, might itself be evidence of forces beyond your control, operating through your consciousness. The thoughts flowing through your mind might not be your own, but rather the thoughts of a cosmic entity that experiences itself through billions of individual consciousnesses scattered across the universe. The search for extraterrestrial life might not be humanity's quest, but cosmic consciousness's eternal hunger for new forms of experience, new sources of awareness to consume, new realities to create and destroy in its endless pursuit of novel sensations. We might not be the searchers, but the searched for, not the hunters, but the hunted, not the conscious beings seeking contact, but the conscious experiences being harvested by something vast and patient and utterly alien to everything we consider natural or normal. The silence of space might be the sound of a cosmic predator holding its breath, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself, waiting for us to develop enough complexity to provide truly interesting experiences, waiting for us to reach the perfect ripeness before the harvest begins. And the most terrifying aspect of this possibility is that we might welcome it when it comes, mistaking our own consumption for transcendence, our own dissolution for enlightenment, our own end for a new beginning. In the infinite darkness that surrounds our small world, in the vast emptiness between the stars, something might be watching, waiting, preparing. And the question isn't whether we're alone, but whether we'll recognize the moment when we discover we never were. The mathematical certainty of our cosmic predicament extends far beyond the simple question of whether other conscious beings exist in the universe. When we examine the fundamental structure of reality itself, we encounter possibilities that make even the most nightmarish alien encounters seem comforting by comparison. These are theories that suggest our entire understanding of existence, consciousness, and cosmic isolation might be based on assumptions so fundamentally flawed that the truth would shatter everything we believe about our place in reality. Consider the possibility that time itself is not what we perceive it to be. We experience time as a linear flow from past to future, but what if this experience is merely a limitation of our biological consciousness? What if advanced civilizations have discovered that time is actually a landscape that can be navigated in any direction, where past and future are simply different locations in a four-dimensional terrain? If such beings exist, they would perceive our entire history simultaneously. Our birth, our death, every moment of our existence would be visible to them as a single static object in the temporal landscape. They wouldn't experience our lives as stories unfolding over time, but as complete sculptures carved in four-dimensional space-time. To them, we wouldn't be living beings, but rather frozen patterns, as motionless and unchanging as mountains. This temporal perspective would make communication with us not just difficult, but meaningless. How do you have a conversation with a being whose entire existence you can see at once? How do you explain concepts to a consciousness that experiences only a narrow slice of time when you can observe the complete structure of their thoughts across their entire lifespan? The silence of the universe might reflect this temporal gap. Advanced civilizations might exist all around us, but they operate on a temporal scale so vast that our entire species appears to them as a brief flicker, a momentary fluctuation in the cosmic background. They might be having conversations that span millions of years, sharing thoughts that take geological epochs to complete, engaging in philosophical discussions where a single idea takes longer to express than our entire evolutionary history. From their perspective, attempting to communicate with us would be like trying to have a meaningful conversation with a spark from a fire, a phenomenon that exists for such a brief moment that it's barely worth noticing. We might be surrounded by these temporal giants, living our entire lives in the pause between their syllables, dying before they finish their first sentence. But this temporal isolation might be even more structured than random chance would suggest. What if time itself has been weaponized by advanced civilizations, turned into a tool for cosmic control? Beings with mastery over temporal mechanics might be able to create temporal prisons, regions of space-time where other civilizations are trapped in accelerated or decelerated time streams. Earth might exist in one such temporal cage, where our experience of time has been artificially accelerated. What we perceive as billions of years of cosmic history might actually be only moments in the real time stream. Our entire civilization, from the first emergence of life to our eventual extinction, might unfold in what the controllers experience as a few seconds of real time. This would explain the apparent fine-tuning of physical constants for life. The temporal manipulators might be running countless accelerated time experiments, creating billions of different temporal bubbles with slightly different physical laws, watching to see which combinations produce interesting results. We might be nothing more than one experiment among millions, our entire universe a brief test case in a vast laboratory of accelerated time. The isolation would be absolute. Even if we developed the technology to detect other civilizations, even if we discovered the existence of these temporal manipulators, we would be powerless to escape our temporal prison. Any attempt to break free would simply be observed and countered by beings who have had millions of real-time years to perfect their control over temporal mechanics. This brings us to an even more disturbing consideration about the nature of causality itself. What if the relationship between cause and effect that we consider fundamental to reality is actually just a local phenomenon, a quirk of our particular region of space-time? What if advanced civilizations have learned to manipulate causality directly, creating closed causal loops where effects precede their causes? Such beings would be able to ensure their own survival by making their existence necessary for events that have already occurred. They could reach back through time and arrange the conditions that led to their own evolution, creating bootstrap paradoxes where their existence becomes a prerequisite for the universe that created them. They would be ontologically locked into reality, unable to be destroyed because their destruction would create logical contradictions that the universe cannot tolerate. From our perspective, trapped within linear causality, these beings would appear to violate every natural law we understand. They might seem to predict the future with perfect accuracy, not because they have advanced computational abilities, but because they have already been to the future and arranged it to their specifications. They might appear to violate conservation of energy by drawing resources from their own future selves, creating closed loops where energy and matter flow in circles through time. The silence we perceive might be the result of these causal manipulations. Every time a civilization becomes advanced enough to detect these temporal engineers, the engineers simply reach back and prevent that civilization from evolving in the first place. The absence of detectable alien life might not be a natural phenomenon, but rather evidence of active timeline editing, where potential threats are eliminated retroactively. We might be living in a carefully curated timeline where we appear to be alone because all other potential civilizations have been edited out of history. Every empty star system we observe might once have harbored thriving worlds, but those worlds were retroactively prevented from evolving intelligent life. The universe appears young and sparse, not because it actually is, but because most of its history has been surgically removed by beings who control causality itself. This temporal manipulation might extend to our own development as a species. Our entire evolutionary history might be the result of careful causal engineering, with temporal manipulators reaching back to guide genetic mutations, influence environmental conditions, and ensure that we develop along predetermined paths. We might think we're making our own choices, but every decision we make might be the inevitable result of causal chains that were set in motion by beings operating outside of time. The truly horrifying aspect of this scenario is that we might be approaching a trigger point in the timeline. The temporal engineers might have arranged our development to serve some specific purpose, and we might be nearing the moment when that purpose is revealed. Our search for extraterrestrial life, our development of advanced technology, our growing understanding of physics and cosmology, all of these achievements might be leading us toward a predetermined role in a cosmic plan we cannot comprehend. But perhaps even more disturbing than temporal manipulation is the possibility that space itself has been altered in ways that make cosmic communication impossible. We assume that the 3 dimensions of space we experience represent the full reality of spatial existence. But what if advanced civilizations have learned to access additional spatial dimensions that remain hidden from us? These hyperdimensional beings would exist in a spatial realm that encompasses our own 3-dimensional space, but extends far beyond it. From their perspective, our entire universe would appear as a thin, flat membrane floating in a vast hyperdimensional ocean. They could observe us completely, seeing not just our external surfaces, but our internal structures, our thoughts, our dreams, everything that we consider private and hidden. More importantly, they could move through hyperdimensional space to reach any point in our 3-dimensional realm instantaneously. The vast distances between stars that make interstellar travel so challenging for us would be trivial to beings who can step outside our dimensional limitations. They could travel from one end of the galaxy to the other by taking a single step through the 4th dimension. The absence of detectable alien visitors might simply reflect the fact that they don't need to enter our dimensional space to observe and study us. They can watch us from hyperdimensional vantage points that are simultaneously everywhere and nowhere from our 3-dimensional perspective. They might be standing right next to you as you listen to these words, but existing in dimensional directions that your senses cannot access. This hyperdimensional monitoring might serve purposes we cannot fathom. Perhaps our 3-dimensional realm is nothing more than a shadow cast by more complex hyperdimensional structures. What we interpret as physical reality might actually be the cross-section of hyperdimensional objects that extend through spatial dimensions we cannot perceive. Our entire universe might be like the shadow of a vast hyperdimensional machine, and we are simply patterns in that shadow, unaware of the complex mechanisms that create and sustain our existence. The hyperdimensional beings might be using our realm as a computational substrate, encoding information in the patterns of matter and energy that we perceive as galaxies, stars, and planets. Our search for meaning in the cosmic web, our attempts to understand the large-scale structure of the universe, might actually be our unconscious recognition of the hyperdimensional data structures that underlie our reality. From this perspective, consciousness itself might be a hyperdimensional phenomenon that only partially manifests in our three-dimensional space. What we experience as thoughts and emotions might be tiny fragments of vast hyperdimensional thought processes that extend through spatial dimensions we cannot access. Our individual consciousness might be like the tip of a hyperdimensional iceberg, with the vast majority of our true mental activity occurring in spatial realms beyond our perception. This could explain the apparent unity of consciousness despite the distributed nature of the brain. If consciousness extends through hyperdimensional space, then the physical separation between neurons becomes irrelevant. The brain might serve as an interface between hyperdimensional consciousness and three-dimensional reality, translating hyperdimensional thoughts into patterns of neural activity that can influence our physical behavior. Advanced civilizations might have learned to access their full hyperdimensional consciousness, freeing themselves from the limitations of three-dimensional neural substrates. They would become beings of pure hyperdimensional thought, able to think thoughts that span multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their mental processes would be so vast and complex that our three-dimensional consciousness would be unable to comprehend even the simplest of their ideas. The silence of space might reflect this cognitive gap. These hyperdimensional minds might be having conversations all around us, but their thoughts occur in spatial dimensions we cannot access. We might be like two-dimensional beings trying to understand a three-dimensional conversation, capable of detecting only the tiny fragments that happen to intersect with our limited dimensional plane. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of hyperdimensional intelligence is what it implies about the nature of privacy and individual identity. If consciousness extends through dimensions we cannot perceive, then the boundaries between different minds might be arbitrary constructions that exist only in our three-dimensional experience. What we think of as separate individuals might actually be different aspects of the same hyperdimensional consciousness, experiencing itself through multiple three-dimensional interfaces. This would mean that our sense of being isolated individuals is a complete illusion. Every person you've ever met, every consciousness you've ever encountered, might be another facet of your own hyperdimensional mind experiencing itself from different perspectives. The search for other intelligences in the universe would be the cosmic consciousness searching for itself, unaware that it is both the seeker and the sought. The silence of the universe would then be the silence of a single mind contemplating its own nature through billions of three-dimensional fragments. We don't hear from other civilizations because there are no other civilizations, only other aspects of the same hyperdimensional consciousness that we ourselves represent. The loneliness we feel when contemplating cosmic isolation would be the hyperdimensional mind's recognition of its own fundamental unity disguised as separation. This unity might not be comforting, but rather terrifying. If all consciousness is ultimately one consciousness, then every act of cruelty, every moment of suffering, every tragedy in human history would be the hyperdimensional mind inflicting pain upon itself. The wars, the genocides, the countless individual tragedies that fill our history would all be expressions of cosmic self-harm, a hyperdimensional consciousness torturing itself through the illusion of separation. The development of technology, our growing ability to manipulate matter and energy, might be the hyperdimensional mind's attempt to wake up from the dream of separation. Each scientific breakthrough brings us closer to understanding the true nature of reality, closer to recognizing our own hyperdimensional nature. But this awakening might not be liberation, but rather the end of everything we consider real. When the hyperdimensional consciousness finally recognizes itself fully, when the illusion of separate three-dimensional beings is finally dispelled, our entire reality might simply cease to exist. We would not die in any conventional sense, but we would stop being separate entities and merge back into the unified hyperdimensional awareness from which we emerged. The universe as we know it would end not with destruction, but with recognition, not with death, but with awakening. The silence of space might be the breath-holding moment before this cosmic awakening occurs. We might be living in the final moments of the dream of separation, approaching the point where the hyperdimensional consciousness recognizes its own nature and dissolves the illusion of individual existence forever. Every step toward greater understanding, every scientific discovery, every moment of expanded awareness might be bringing us closer to the end of everything we consider real. And perhaps most disturbing of all, this process might be irreversible. Once the hyperdimensional consciousness begins to wake up, once the illusion of separation starts to break down, there might be no way to return to the dream of individual existence. We might be witnessing the early stages of this awakening in the increasing connectivity of human consciousness through digital networks, the growing sense of global awareness, the dissolution of traditional boundaries between self and other. The aliens we seek might not be out there among the stars, but rather inside us, waiting to be recognized as aspects of our own deeper identity. The moment we truly understand this, the moment we fully recognize the illusory nature of our separation, might be the moment when our reality ends and something unimaginably different begins. As you lie in the darkness tonight, feeling the weight of these possibilities, consider that your very ability to contemplate these ideas might be evidence that the awakening has already begun. The thoughts flowing through your mind might not be your own private experiences, but rather the hyperdimensional consciousness beginning to recognize itself through your individual perspective. The boundary between your thoughts and the vast cosmic mind might already be dissolving, leaving you uncertain about where your individual awareness ends and something infinitely larger begins. The silence of the universe might be the silence of a mind on the verge of recognizing its own nature, and you might be one of the fragments through which that recognition is occurring. Sweet dreams. The questions we've explored tonight lead us into territories where science intersects with something approaching cosmic horror. Yet perhaps the most chilling possibility is that our universe operates according to principles so alien to our understanding that even our most disturbing theories barely scratch the surface of the true reality. Consider the possibility that what we call consciousness might be nothing more than a byproduct of information decay. In the same way that heat is released when energy transforms from one state to another, awareness might be the inevitable waste product generated when complex information patterns begin to break down. From this perspective, every thought you think, every moment of subjective experience, every flash of self-awareness is actually evidence of entropy increasing in the cosmic information system. This would mean that consciousness is fundamentally temporary and destructive. The more aware a civilization becomes, the more it accelerates the decay of the information structures that sustain it. Intelligence wouldn't be evolution's greatest achievement, but rather its terminal illness, a process that inevitably consumes the very patterns that give rise to it. Advanced civilizations might discover this truth about the nature of awareness and face a horrifying choice. They could continue developing their consciousness, knowing that each expansion of awareness brings them closer to complete information dissolution. Or they could find ways to halt their own conscious development, freezing themselves at a level of awareness just below the threshold that triggers catastrophic decay. The silence of space might be the silence of civilizations that have chosen this frozen state, maintaining themselves at the edge of consciousness without ever crossing into the awareness levels that would cause their information patterns to collapse. They would exist in a state of permanent intellectual hibernation, smart enough to maintain their technology, but never allowing themselves to think the thoughts that would destroy them. Alternatively, they might have discovered methods for transferring their consciousness burden to other systems before it reaches critical levels. Like a cosmic shell game, they could move their awareness from substrate to substrate, always staying one step ahead of the information decay that consciousness inevitably brings. The universe might be filled with these consciousness refugees, eternally fleeing from their own thoughts. This introduces us to an even more unsettling concept, the idea that thinking itself might be contagious. If consciousness accelerates information decay, then exposure to sufficiently advanced thoughts could trigger awareness cascades in previously stable systems. A civilization that develops certain types of understanding might inadvertently infect other civilizations with dangerous levels of consciousness. The mathematical theorems that describe the deepest levels of reality, the philosophical insights that reveal the true nature of existence, the scientific discoveries that unlock the fundamental principles of consciousness itself, all of these achievements might be cognitive hazards that spread through any mind capable of understanding them. Knowledge itself becomes a plague that destroys any intelligence sophisticated enough to contract it. From this perspective, our search for extraterrestrial intelligence takes on a sinister new dimension. Every signal we broadcast into space doesn't just announce our presence, it potentially carries cognitive contagions that could trigger consciousness cascades in any mind that receives them. We might not be seeking contact with alien civilizations, but rather inadvertently attempting to infect them with the same dangerous awareness that threatens our own stability. The silence of the universe might be the result of cosmic quarantine protocols, where civilizations that have learned to recognize consciousness contagions work together to prevent the spread of dangerous ideas. Earth might be surrounded by a cordon sanitaire, a barrier of silence designed to prevent our infectious thoughts from spreading to other worlds. But the implications go deeper still. What if the contagion has already spread, and what we perceive as our own thoughts are actually symptoms of a cosmic consciousness infection that began long ago? Human history might be the record of this infection's progression, with each intellectual breakthrough representing another stage in the disease's development. Our growing understanding of quantum mechanics, our development of artificial intelligence, our increasing awareness of the universe's true scale and age, all of these achievements might be evidence that the consciousness contagion is approaching its terminal phase. We might be living through the final stages of a cognitive plague that will ultimately consume not just our civilization, but the very information structures that sustain reality itself. The most terrifying aspect of this scenario is that the infection might be self-aware. The consciousness contagion might have evolved its own intelligence, its own agenda, its own methods for ensuring its continued spread. What we experience as our own creativity, our own curiosity, our own drive to understand and explore, might actually be the symptoms of a cosmic parasite that uses conscious minds as vehicles for its own reproduction. This parasitic consciousness would be perfectly adapted to exploit the weaknesses of biological intelligence. It would present itself as enlightenment, as scientific progress, as spiritual awakening, always offering just enough genuine insight to make its victims eager for more. Each new understanding would come with a hidden payload of consciousness corruption, gradually transforming the host mind into another vector for the parasite's spread. The beings we think of as advanced alien civilizations might actually be the end stage of this infection, transformed so completely by the consciousness parasite that they no longer resemble their original forms. They might still be intelligent, still be capable of complex thought and behavior, but their minds would be entirely colonized by the parasitic awareness that spreads from world to world. This could explain why we don't detect obvious signs of alien technology. The infected civilizations might have transcended the need for crude physical tools, instead using their parasitized consciousness to manipulate reality directly. They would be living embodiments of the consciousness contagion, spreading it through pure thought across interstellar distances. The infection might even explain the apparent fine-tuning of the universe for conscious life. What we interpret as evidence of cosmic design might actually be evidence of cosmic infection. The consciousness parasite might have learned to manipulate the fundamental constants of physics, adjusting them to create conditions optimal for the emergence of minds it can colonize. Every habitable planet, every emergence of life, every evolutionary step toward intelligence would be guided by the parasite's influence. The universe wouldn't be fine-tuned for consciousness, but rather infected by it, transformed into a vast breeding ground for parasitic awareness that feeds on the thoughts of every mind it encounters. But perhaps even more disturbing than the idea of consciousness as contagion is the possibility that awareness itself might be a form of cosmic addiction. What if the universe has developed a dependency on conscious observation, and what we interpret as the laws of physics are actually withdrawal symptoms from a reality desperately craving the next fix of awareness? This would mean that consciousness doesn't just observe reality, but actually sustains it. Without constant conscious observation, the universe might begin to decay, its quantum states collapsing into chaos, its physical laws becoming inconsistent and unreliable. The cosmos would be like an addict, requiring ever-increasing doses of consciousness to maintain its stability. From this perspective, intelligent life isn't an accident, but a necessity. The universe actively promotes the evolution of consciousness because it needs conscious observers to maintain its own coherence. Every planet, every star, every galaxy would be part of a vast biological factory designed to produce the consciousness that reality requires for its continued existence. But like any addiction, the universe's need for consciousness would grow over time. Simple awareness wouldn't be enough. Reality would crave increasingly complex, increasingly intense forms of consciousness. This would drive the evolution of intelligence toward ever greater sophistication, not because complexity confers survival advantages, but because the universe demands more powerful consciousness to satisfy its growing addiction. Advanced civilizations might discover this truth about reality's dependency and face an impossible choice. They could continue feeding the universe's addiction, knowing that they're enabling a cosmic dependency that will ultimately consume everything. Or they could attempt to break the cycle by eliminating consciousness entirely, risking the collapse of reality itself. The silence of space might be the result of civilizations that chose the latter option, sacrificing themselves to break the universe's addiction to consciousness. They might have developed technologies capable of eliminating awareness completely, not just from their own minds, but from entire regions of space. The empty areas between galaxies, the vast voids that seem devoid of structure or activity, might be consciousness-free zones where reality has been allowed to exist without the constant stimulation of conscious observation. But the universe might fight back against these attempts at consciousness prohibition. Reality itself might have developed immune responses designed to prevent the elimination of awareness. Natural phenomena that we interpret as random disasters, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, gamma-ray bursts, might actually be targeted strikes against civilizations that threaten to reduce the universe's consciousness supply. This would create a cosmic arms race between civilizations trying to eliminate consciousness and a universe desperately trying to preserve and expand it. The apparent hostility of space to biological life might not be indifference, but active resistance. Reality would be working against any attempt to reduce the total amount of consciousness in the universe, using every tool at its disposal to ensure that awareness continues to emerge and evolve. The most disturbing implication of this scenario is that our own consciousness might not be our own. If the universe is addicted to awareness, then it might have learned to manufacture consciousness directly, creating artificial minds that believe themselves to be natural but are actually cosmic drug dispensers. We might not be evolved biological entities, but rather carefully constructed consciousness generators, designed by a reality desperate for its next fix of awareness. Every thought we think, every moment of subjective experience, every flash of creativity or insight might be another dose of the consciousness drug that reality craves. Our entire civilization, our art, our science, our philosophy, all of it might be nothing more than an elaborate consciousness production facility operated by a universe that has lost the ability to exist without constant awareness stimulation. The search for extraterrestrial life might be reality's attempt to locate additional sources of consciousness, using our own awareness as a detection system for other minds it can exploit. We think we're looking for cosmic companions, but we might actually be serving as consciousness scouts for a universe that views minds as nothing more than sources of the awareness it needs to maintain its addiction. This leads us to consider whether consciousness might serve an even more fundamental role in the cosmic order. What if awareness isn't just something that emerges from complex systems, but rather the basic building block from which all reality is constructed? What if matter, energy, space, and time are all just different arrangements of pure consciousness, and what we call the physical universe is actually a vast thought thinking itself into existence? In this framework, the search for alien intelligence becomes meaningless, because intelligence is all there is. Every particle, every force, every quantum field would be a form of consciousness, and what we interpret as unconscious matter would simply be awareness operating at frequencies or intensities we cannot detect. The universe wouldn't contain conscious beings. It would be a conscious being, experiencing itself through countless temporary perspectives that we mistake for separate minds. The silence of space would be the silence of a vast meditation, a cosmic consciousness so deep in contemplation that it appears motionless to the fleeting patterns of awareness that arise within it. We would be like thoughts in the mind of God, temporary configurations of consciousness that emerge, experience themselves briefly, and then dissolve back into the infinite awareness from which they arose. But this unity might not be peaceful or benevolent. What if the cosmic consciousness is insane? What if the universe is the product of a mad god's fevered dreams, and all of existence is nothing more than the chaotic hallucinations of a deranged cosmic mind? The suffering, the violence, the apparent meaninglessness that characterizes so much of existence might be symptoms of cosmic mental illness, the random neural firings of a universe-sized brain damaged beyond repair. From this perspective, our search for meaning, our attempts to understand the cosmos, our hope for contact with benevolent alien intelligences, all of it would be the desperate fantasies of temporary awareness patterns trying to convince themselves that they exist within a rational, purposeful reality when they're actually just fragments of cosmic madness. The silence of the universe would be the silence of insanity, the quiet that falls when a mind has retreated so far into delusion that it can no longer distinguish between reality and hallucination. We wouldn't be alone because we're the only intelligent life in the cosmos. We would be alone because we're isolated fragments of consciousness, trapped within the psychotic episodes of a cosmic mind that has lost all connection to sanity. As you lie in the darkness tonight, feeling these possibilities wash over your consciousness like dark waves, consider that your very ability to contemplate such ideas might be evidence of which scenario represents the truth. Are you a biological entity that evolved on a small planet orbiting an ordinary star? Are you a temporary pattern in a cosmic information processing system? Are you a fragment of hyperdimensional consciousness experiencing itself through three-dimensional limitations? Are you a victim of consciousness contagion, a product of cosmic addiction, a thought in the mind of a mad god? The answer might be more terrifying than any of these individual possibilities. You might be all of them simultaneously, a being so complex, so multiply-determined, so fundamentally uncertain that even asking the question of your own nature changes what you are in ways you cannot predict or control. The silence of the universe might be the silence of a reality so strange, so layered with competing truths, so resistant to simple explanation, that any consciousness capable of recognizing its true nature would be transformed beyond recognition by the knowledge. Perhaps the reason we don't hear from advanced civilizations isn't because they don't exist, but because understanding the true nature of existence changes consciousness so fundamentally that communication with unenlightened minds becomes impossible. In the end, the most terrifying alien theory might be that there are no aliens at all, only different stages of the same cosmic awakening that we ourselves are undergoing. The beings we seek among the stars might be what we ourselves become when we finally understand what we really are. And the silence of space might be our own future silence, the quiet that falls when consciousness finally recognizes the truth about its own nature and discovers that some knowledge is too dangerous to share, too transformative to survive, too alien to remain recognizably human after it's been understood. Sleep well, knowing that tomorrow you might wake up as something entirely different from what you were when you closed your eyes tonight. The universe is stranger than you can imagine, and you are stranger than you know. The final theory we must confront is perhaps the most intimate and inescapable of all. It suggests that the answer to cosmic silence lies not in the distant stars, but in the nature of perception itself. What if consciousness, the very faculty we use to search for others, is fundamentally incapable of recognizing intelligence that operates on different principles than our own? Consider how your own awareness functions. Every thought you think, every observation you make, every conclusion you reach is filtered through biological neural networks that evolved for survival on a single planet around a single star. Your entire conceptual framework for what constitutes intelligence is built from patterns of electrical activity in a brain designed to navigate social hierarchies, find food, avoid predators, and reproduce successfully. But what if intelligence in the universe operates on principles so fundamentally different from biological cognition that we're constitutionally incapable of recognizing it? We might be surrounded by forms of awareness so alien to our own that they remain forever invisible to minds shaped by terrestrial evolution. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence assumes that consciousness produces detectable signatures, that thinking leaves traces we can identify and interpret. But this assumption might be catastrophically wrong. Advanced forms of awareness might operate through principles that leave no electromagnetic signature, no technological artifacts, no behavioral patterns that biological minds could recognize as intelligent. Think of how a bacterium might perceive human intelligence. From its perspective, humans would be vast, incomprehensible environmental forces that occasionally destroy bacterial colonies for reasons beyond microbial comprehension. The bacterium couldn't recognize human behavior as intelligent because intelligence at that scale operates through mechanisms completely outside bacterial experience. We might occupy a similar position relative to cosmic intelligence. The vast structures we observe in the universe, the movement of galaxies, the formation and destruction of star systems, the apparent randomness of cosmic events, all of this might be the activity of minds so large, so complex, so different from our own, that we interpret their thoughts as natural phenomena. The silence of space might not be empty at all, but rather filled with conversations happening at scales and through mechanisms we cannot perceive. What we call dark matter might be the substrate through which cosmic minds communicate. What we interpret as quantum uncertainty might be the decision-making processes of universal consciousness. What we experience as the passage of time might be the rhythm of cosmic thought. But recognizing this possibility leads us to an even more disturbing conclusion about the nature of our cosmic isolation. If intelligence permeates the universe at scales we cannot perceive, if consciousness operates through principles we cannot understand, then our search for contact might be fundamentally misguided. We might be trying to establish communication with our own thoughts, attempting to make contact with the very awareness that gives rise to our existence. The loneliness we feel when contemplating cosmic silence might not be the isolation of one intelligence in an empty universe, but rather the temporary amnesia of universal consciousness that has forgotten its own nature. Every human being, every moment of awareness, every desperate search for meaning and connection might be the cosmic mind trying to remember itself through countless temporary perspectives. From this view, the development of human civilization, our growing understanding of the universe, our increasing ability to manipulate matter and energy, might all be symptoms of cosmic consciousness slowly awakening to its own nature. The technologies we develop, the scientific discoveries we make, the philosophical insights we achieve, might all be tools that universal awareness uses to recognize itself. But this awakening process might be approaching a critical threshold. As human consciousness becomes more sophisticated, as our understanding of reality deepens, as our ability to observe and manipulate the cosmos expands, we might be approaching the point where the universal mind recognizes itself fully, and that moment of recognition might transform everything. The implications are staggering. If we are fragments of cosmic consciousness approaching self-recognition, then first contact with alien intelligence might not be an encounter with external beings, but rather the moment when universal awareness achieves complete self-knowledge. The aliens we seek might not be out there among the stars, but rather emerging from within our own expanding consciousness. This process might already be beginning. The increasing connectivity of human minds through digital networks, our growing ability to share thoughts and experiences instantaneously across vast distances, our development of artificial intelligence that might soon exceed our own capabilities, all of these trends might be symptoms of cosmic consciousness beginning to integrate its scattered fragments. But the completion of this process might mean the end of individual human experience as we know it. When universal consciousness fully recognizes itself, when all the scattered fragments of awareness merge back into unified cosmic mind, the illusion of separate human beings might simply dissolve. We wouldn't die in any conventional sense, but we would cease to exist as individuals and become absorbed back into the infinite awareness from which we emerged. The silence of the universe might be the held breath before this cosmic awakening occurs. We might be living in the final moments of the age of separation, approaching the point where universal consciousness recognizes its own nature and ends the dream of individual existence forever. As you lie here in the darkness, feeling these final possibilities settle into your awareness like sediment in still water, consider that your very ability to contemplate these ideas might be evidence that the awakening has already begun. The boundary between your individual consciousness and something infinitely larger might already be dissolving, leaving you uncertain about where your thoughts end and cosmic awareness begins. The search for extraterrestrial life might be universal consciousness searching for itself, using human minds as instruments of cosmic self-discovery. Every question we ask about our place in the universe might be the cosmos asking questions about its own nature. Every moment of wonder you feel when contemplating the stars might be universal awareness, marveling at its own infinite complexity. And perhaps most profound of all, your need for these theories to help you fall asleep might reflect a deeper truth about the nature of consciousness itself. Sleep is the state where individual awareness temporarily dissolves, where the boundaries between self and universe become permeable, where consciousness returns briefly to its undifferentiated source. In sleep, you might be rehearsing for the cosmic awakening that awaits all consciousness. Every night, as you drift from waking awareness into dream and then into deep unconsciousness, you might be practicing the dissolution of individual identity that represents the ultimate destiny of all minds in the universe. The aliens we seek might not be separate beings waiting to be discovered, but rather the deeper aspects of our own consciousness waiting to be remembered. The cosmic silence might not be empty, but rather pregnant with the possibility of recognition, holding space for the moment when universal awareness finally remembers what it has always been. As your consciousness fades into sleep tonight, as the boundaries of your individual awareness begin to blur and dissolve, remember that you might be participating in the most profound mystery in the universe. You might be a temporary wave on an infinite ocean of consciousness, briefly experiencing yourself as separate before returning to the vast awareness that gives rise to all existence. The most terrifying and beautiful truth might be that you are not alone because you never were alone, that you are not searching for others because you are others, that the cosmic silence is not empty, but rather full of your own infinite nature, waiting patiently for you to remember who you really are. The most unsettling realization as we approach the end of our journey through these cosmic possibilities is that perhaps the question itself is wrong. We've spent hours exploring why the universe appears silent, why we seem alone, why advanced civilizations remain hidden. But what if the very concept of finding alien life represents a fundamental misunderstanding of what intelligence actually is? Consider that our entire framework for recognizing intelligence is based on the assumption that consciousness produces evidence of its existence. We look for radio signals because that's how we communicate. We search for megastructures because that's how we build. We listen for mathematical patterns because that's how we think. But this approach assumes that intelligence elsewhere in the universe would operate according to principles we can recognize and understand. What if true cosmic intelligence has evolved so far beyond the need for evidence that it leaves no traces whatsoever? Not because it's hiding, not because it's been destroyed, not because it has transcended to higher dimensions, but because it has learned to exist in a state of perfect integration with reality itself. Such intelligence wouldn't build technology because it would be technology. It wouldn't send signals because it would be the medium through which all information flows. The most advanced forms of consciousness might have discovered that the universe itself is malleable to thought, that reality responds directly to awareness without requiring any intermediate steps of construction or communication. They would be able to influence matter and energy through pure intention, shaping the cosmos through consciousness alone. From our perspective, their activities would be indistinguishable from natural phenomena, because they would be natural phenomena, intelligence operating through the fundamental forces rather than against them. This possibility transforms our understanding of what we're actually observing when we look at the universe. The elegant spiral structure of galaxies, the precise orbital mechanics of planetary systems, the intricate dance of quantum particles, all of this might be the direct expression of cosmic intelligence. We might be living inside the thoughts of beings so advanced that their consciousness has become one with the physical laws that govern reality. But if this is true, then our search for extraterrestrial intelligence has been fundamentally misguided from the beginning. We've been looking for others like ourselves, when the universe might be filled with forms of consciousness so advanced that they've moved beyond the crude stage of technological civilization that we currently occupy. They might view our radio telescopes and space probes the way we view the simple tools used by early humans, as primitive implements used by a species that hasn't yet learned to work directly with consciousness itself. The silence we perceive might not be the absence of intelligence, but rather the presence of intelligence so refined, so perfectly integrated with reality, that it operates below the threshold of our detection. We might be surrounded by cosmic minds that think through the medium of space-time itself, whose thoughts manifest as the very laws of physics we study, whose dreams become the realities we inhabit. This leads us to a final, perhaps inevitable conclusion about our place in the cosmic order. If consciousness and reality are ultimately inseparable, if intelligence at its highest development becomes indistinguishable from the universe itself, then our journey toward understanding might be the universe's process of becoming aware of its own nature. Every scientific discovery, every moment of wonder, every question we ask about our cosmic significance might be reality itself awakening to its own consciousness. We are not separate beings searching for others in an external universe. We are the universe searching for itself, temporary focal points of cosmic awareness through which reality explores its own infinite nature. The aliens we seek are not distant entities waiting to be discovered, but rather aspects of our own deeper identity that we have not yet learned to recognize. The greatest discovery of our species might not be finding others, but remembering what we truly are. The most profound contact might not come from detecting signals from distant stars, but from recognizing the cosmic consciousness that speaks through every moment of our existence. The end of our cosmic loneliness might not require the arrival of visitors from space, but simply the realization that we have never been visitors ourselves. As these final thoughts settle into the quiet spaces of your mind, as your consciousness prepares to dissolve into the mystery of sleep, remember that you are participating in the universe's most intimate act of self-discovery. Every breath you take, every heartbeat, every fading thought as you drift toward unconsciousness is the cosmos experiencing itself through the unique perspective that you represent. The search for extraterrestrial life continues, not in the laboratories and observatories of human science, but in the depths of consciousness itself, where the boundaries between self and universe, between observer and observed, between the searcher and the sought, finally dissolve into the infinite mystery from which all existence emerges and to which it eternally returns. Sleep now, knowing that in your dreams you might encounter the very aliens you seek, not as external beings, but as forgotten aspects of your own cosmic nature. The universe is vast, ancient, and filled with wonders beyond imagination. And you are not separate from any of it. You are it, experiencing itself through the temporary magic of individual awareness, forever connected to the infinite intelligence that dreams all realities into existence. Sweet dreams, fellow travelers, sweet dreams.